Panelists. Nico Lange from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Germany. He is head of the political consulting department. Is that almost correct? Then we have Andris Piebalgs, who is chair of Vienotiba, or Unity Party. We have Vita Matiss, who is a visiting professor at the Riga Graduate School of Law. We have Doru Frantescu, who is director of the Vote Watch Europe. And we have Tarmo Jüristo from Estonia, who is head of management board of Praxis, a think tank. I'm sorry to say that at the last minute, the pirate who was supposed to be on the panel jumped ship, or more precisely, Smári McCarthy, who had promised to come to our forum from the Pirate Party in Iceland, could not make it at the very last minute, as he warned might happen, because the Pirate Party is actually very actively in talks with the coalition about forming a government. So we will miss him. But I would like to begin with a question to all panelists. Would you please name 1 or 3 most important problems that the political parties face today? I'll start with Nico. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation and the possibility to share some views here. 1 or 3, I will pick 3 then, as probably any politician would do. I would just briefly, I was thinking while we were talking, I was thinking why the first row is empty. Maybe that's a Latvian tradition, I don't know. Or are we awaiting more important people to come? I don't know. But that's my first point. One of the fundamental challenges for political parties today is personnel. It's one of the main functions of political parties, and I agree with you that democracy is only possible with political parties. There is no democracy without political parties. And one of the main functions of political parties is the recruitment of political personnel and the development of political personnel. And I see 2 dimensions of this problem. One is, I mean, here in this group there are many people members of political parties, but if it's true that democracy is only possible with political parties, we should not talk about political parties, we should join political parties, we should be active in them, and we should live democracy within political parties. And we see a tendency that people feel very well I do not want to talk badly about NGOs, because I'm invited by one, but people feel very well, oh, I'm in the NGO sector, I'm one of the good guys, I'm doing good things for my society, but the parties, they do the bad stuff. So, I mean, it's also a problem of recognition of political parties in the society. The second dimension is parties need to be open for new personnel. Because we have a tendency, and I think that's true for Germany as it is true for Latvia and other countries, that we have, for example, a selection of candidates that are old, that are mainly male, the members are male and old in the political parties. In Germany, for example, in the CDU, average age is 59 years, 74% of party members of the CDU are men. Usually that results in candidates for lists or for constituencies or for mayors that are very much liked by the party but not so much liked by the people, which is a problem because we would like to have candidates that are liked by the people and accepted by the party. So personnel is my first point. My second point is language. Representatives of political parties all over the world have a tendency of speaking non-understandable, very ugly language to the people. And guess what? People do not understand this and people do not like this. And that's one of the reasons for new political movements and for new forms of political communications to arise. Party politicians, they do not tell what really is the situation. They do not really tell what are the options to solve it. They are talking around things very often, and they are using technocratic, ugly language. I think parties should change their language, and that's not an easy task. It's very challenging to put complex reality and possible solutions into understandable words. But that's the second point I want to make. And briefly, the third point that is a challenge for political parties is, to me, it's not logical at all that the desires in the societies, especially in the societies within the European Union and in the West in general, the desires to participate in political processes, they have been changing fundamentally. We are more pluralistic and individualistic now. People have a different understanding of how to engage themselves, how to use their own time budgets, how to work result-oriented. But the forms of participation the political parties are offering, at least for Germany, they are the forms they offered also already in the 50s and 60s. It's not compatible with the desires of participating in the society, what kind of offers are made by the political parties. The parties have to be better. And my last point is, the only way to change those three elements as political parties is, sorry for saying that, is to be open to experiments. We do not know what works. But parties must be open to experimenting and finding out and developing ideas how to involve people. And then probably we will have also the impression that the political parties are alive. Because to me, in their structural appearance, they sometimes seem to be a little bit dead or crusty. And now the last point, after the last point, for many political parties, especially of the political center-right, the key question now is whether to stay open or to close up. That's also true for countries. That's also true for political approaches in general, but I think that's the key question here, and I'm voting for being open. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Talking about, we will probably talk about political experiments more. We witnessed one last night at a film screening of a political experiment that Tarmo Jüristo helped conduct in Estonia, and we'll probably mention that during the debate today as well. Thank you, Nico. Mr. Piebalgs.
Well, thank you very much for organizing the debate. And it's true that 21st century brings so many changes that you could question, do the political parties as an element of political system still has a role to play? But I believe that, well, we can't escape political parties also in the future. Because if I see the tendencies that people are having and perceptions, it's getting more and more stronger attachment to constitution, original constitution. I just mentioned example with Renzi proposing, well, I would say rather modest changes and having enormous opposition for different reasons, but one of the main reasons is just, well, why should we change the constitution? So that's why for parliamentary democracy you can't avoid having parties. For parties themselves, I believe that there are three major challenges to answer. One is to provide a long-term vision, long-term orientation in the world that changes rapidly, from technological point of view in particular, but also from the media development. So I think that is where party would like the country or the world to go. The second is declining basis, because it's true that less and less people would like to be members of the party. And I think the attempts of Labour electing leadership, or in France with now a competition for the candidate from the right, I would say attracting supporters, people who support the values of the party, perhaps is a way forward, that we should not be over ambitious on having enormously huge parties, but perhaps on having more supporting base, but not necessarily members of the party. And third, it's also very clear in this world, we need charismatic leaders in politics. People who could translate this party vision in simple messages and at the same time would be also, well, celebrities. Because it's very clear that today's world are very much focused on celebrities, and if we would like political message to be passed to the citizens, then I would say it's a particular task for party leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Vita Matiss.
Good morning. Three of my points or challenges will slightly overlap with the previous two gentlemen. But the first major challenge, I believe, today, in today's political environment, is that voters are no longer attuned to the traditional labels of right and left, of conservative and liberal. The main distinction that matters, it seems, to voters today is the distinction between insiders and outsiders. Voters aren't thinking that they don't like that politician or the other politician because they don't agree with their ideas, ideology, or principles. They're saying they don't agree, they don't like that politician because the primary loyalty of that politician is to the system and to the people who have helped him or her succeed within that system. They don't care about his or her loyalty to principles, ideas, or ideologies, but it is perceived that that primary loyalty of that politician is to the system, and that supersedes all other adherences. And of course, the voter himself or herself perceives himself or herself as being outside the system. And that this is the reason that he or she is not doing as well as they could. This perception, populists all over the world are taking it and running with it. And they are successful because, as with all populist movements, there is a grain of truth in this. Who can deny that our ruling classes, let's take Latvia as an example, they have indulged in a lot of self-dealing, indulged in a lot of tit-for-tat in exchange for privileges, jobs, and deals for those within the system. So I think the first challenge is that there's a new paradigm. It's no longer left-right, it's no longer conservative-liberal, it's insider-outsider. Second challenge, touched upon briefly. If you remember, Michelle Obama had this great line in one of her best speeches in the campaign, and it was taken up by Hillary Clinton afterwards. And that line was, when they go low, we go high. Well, we saw how that worked. Huh? Big challenge today. Huh? What inspires the voter of today? As we've seen in the recent elections in the UK and the US, a certain vulgarity, you would even say brutality, seems to give, a lot of people a lift. And it gets passed off as telling it like it is. But again, I return to the same theme. This type of telling it like it is successful precisely because there is, again, a grain of truth there. Years of hearing politicians talk about capacity building and stakeholder, social cohesion, and lovely little phrases like that, makes the voter extremely receptive to anybody who says something like, hey, it's going to be great, or slightly more vulgar phrases. So the challenge is, do you lift your electorate up? Do you educate and lead? Do you speak to their proverbial better angels? Or do you stoop down to the lowest common denominator? And let's be quite honest, some politicians don't even need to stoop there. So, as you mentioned, do politicians today become reality show stars, or at least participate in Dancing with the Stars? Is there no other alternative? And just as news has become entertainment, so politics too, unfortunately, has become entertainment. And as we know, entertainment is escapism. It is not truth-based. And last point, last challenge. People, I believe, today are not looking for someone with an excellent and rational policy. They are looking for somebody who offers them security and reassurance. And nationalism is frequently, and has served frequently, as such a refuge, one where reassurance can be found. Today, the voter wants protection from change, from the other. They want to be protected, and for this, they want the strong arm. They want the authoritarian type of leader. And I think politicians today and political parties today, they've got to take this into consideration, that fear is not rational. Fear has very little to do with the policy prescriptions of a nice little policy paper. And they've got to understand, political parties, that if they don't have any plans for addressing these fears, for addressing the id, the gut, rather than the mind, they might not be so successful. So, to conclude, political parties today who present themselves as outsiders, who give the impression that they're telling it like it is, and who offer the voter a feeling of security and reassurance, well, they're the ones that are winning. And whether this is what a political party should look like, to take the title of your panel, that's an entirely different question. But this is the formula that seems to be working. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. It seems like the picture is almost being drawn about what the political party should look like is not the one that we want to win. But Doru, can you give us your take on challenges from the European perspective, since you've been researching political parties on the European level?
All right, thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. And I think that I can add to this debate by taking a couple of steps back and looking at the big picture in terms of geography and time intervals. And because everything that happens now is not something which comes out of the blue, it's something that has been triggered some time ago. First of all, we have to take a look at the economic conditions, because these somehow have been separated from the public debate so far. When you have an economic crisis and then economic stagnation who has been in place for many years, you can expect that the voters will look for new solutions and that they will no longer trust those who are in power for so long to deal with those solutions. And then, so no wonder that in Southern Europe, for example, you see the rise of parties who go up against the background of very difficult economic conditions. And if we look at the situation in Greece, if you look at Spain, Portugal, Italy, we understand why you know, the populists there gain more and more ground. And then if you combine that with another very big challenge for the European society, especially in the North and Western Europe, which is the big number of migrants coming in against the economic stagnation, then no wonder that the far-right populists this time around, they find a fertile ground for delivering their discourse and for capitalizing on this. So these are problems which are outside of the power of the current traditional political parties, but which the political parties have to be aware of them, and we have to be aware of them, right? So there are things which happen and which we have to deal with. But then the problem that the European political parties have is also what I would call the bureaucratization of the traditional parties. So there are things that happen and that the traditional political parties don't take into account, such as the changes in the technology and the influence that technology and especially the social networks have over the people, and which traditional parties are far from catching up with. Nowadays, the public is effectively flooded with information. It's no longer as it was in the 80s or in the 90s or even in the early 2000s when there were very few sources of information. There were just a couple of media out there, and people have had the time to look at the information, to listen to it, and then to filter it, to discuss with their friends, with their peers, and verify whether the information that has been served to them is true or not, or whether there is something more out there. Nowadays, the pace of serving the information to the people is enormous. So people, you see, there are so many social networks, there are so many TV channels, the radios, and the time for filtering the information is effectively zero. People take the information the way it is served to them. They don't have the time to think whether it is true or not. And this has triggered the arms race among the media, and the media know very well that in order to be relevant to the public, you have to increase the level of interest of your story. So you have to come up with more and more sensational titles in order to appeal to the public. And what we're seeing now, and what the political parties and everyone has to take into account, is that we see, and this is a very dangerous development, more and more unverified stories put out there, even by traditional media, even by channels such as Euronews, even by BBC. You see from time to time stories which are called as coming from unverified sources. When this comes to happen at the level of traditionally established media, you understand the direction and the level of danger that we are now in. And then the response to all of this by traditional parties is, and I'm sorry to have to say it, but somehow the traditional parties still think that the citizens should join their rank because it is their duty, and that they will join the ranks because they instruct them to do so. That's not going to happen. The parties have to understand the fact that they have to seduce the citizens to join them and join not other parties. Because now there are so many ways in which the citizens can be part of the public life that it is very difficult for anyone to see what the incentive for joining a traditional party. You can be influenced in policy from NGOs, and I'm sorry to have to say it, but NGOs are becoming more and more relevant. You can do so from the academia. You can do so from, I don't know, from the media and from many other institutions. You don't need to join the political parties if you want to be influenced and influence policy. And the traditional parties have a very strong competitors in this respect, and therefore they have to adapt their discourse to still be appealing to the citizens. And that is the main challenge. And how to do this? Well, there are a number of solutions. I'm not going to insist on all of them now, but first of all, the parties have to, I think, restructure their thinking. We will no longer see mass parties, mass traditional parties. We will see parties which are a core of professionals, and then people who will join their initiatives on an ad hoc basis. And I think that initiatives that would involve the citizens on an ad hoc basis in the decision-making of the party are the way forward, such as the primaries, but not only the primaries in the party. So we're now seeing, even in France, the Republicans organizing primaries, when the Republicans in France are not known for being the most open party. But still, they decided to go through this democratic exercise to involve the public in their own internal decision-making, which I think is a very good thing. But I think that things should go further than that, and that the party should involve the citizens in their internal decisions on many other occasions, not only when it is about the persons and their leaders, but also when it is about deciding their policies, the policies that they will propose as an electoral program. If you involve the citizens when you're making your program, then they will feel engaged, and they will have some incentives to stay by your side during the elections and beyond, and not look for some other marginal parties as a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Doru. Tarmo, what is your take on the challenges?
Well, I was listening here and thinking that there's an inherent problem in going last in a panel filled with smart people. So it's you either can say something which is original but not very profound, or you can say something profound but then it's probably already said before. So I will probably end up reiterating the points that have been touched in a way or another by previous speakers, but I was thinking I would try to give it a little bit of a different scope. So instead of coming up with 3 points, I would try to make 1 point in 3 stages. And first, to get started, I would pick up from the first sentence that Nico started with, saying that democracy is unthinkable without the political parties. And this is where I would say, yes, the democracy as we have it right now is unthinkable without political parties. But democracy in one way or the other has been around in Europe, as I said in yesterday's screening, for a better part of the last 3,000 years. So you could, of course, argue that the ancient Greek democracy was not a true democracy. So it didn't have the full inclusion of everyone in the society. Then you could argue that the Roman democracy was not a true democracy. It was a clientelist democracy. But then again, if we don't assume, and I don't think we should, if we don't assume that we are living in the end of history, then it is likely that the democracy that we have today will not end up being the true democracy. What I have in mind is that people who will be living in this planet in the year, let's say, 2500, looking back at the 21st century, will probably end up saying the same way, that the democracy of the 21st century was not a true democracy. It was somehow deficient. It wasn't up to the standard what the democracy is going to be in the future. Now, against this background, if you start with these 3 points of sort of what I would suggest is the fundamental challenge of the political parties in the 21st century, is that, in my mind, this was the big political innovation of 19th and especially 20th century, the political parties were this political innovation that allowed for the new kind of liberal parliamentary democracy as we have it now to emerge. And the political parties are a product of this particular time. So, and this time is no longer around, so it has changed. So when we had this discussion with Nico before around the coffee cup, then we mentioned the CDU and the CDU's history, that many members looking back nostalgically to 1950s, the golden times of the party politics in Europe, and wishing these times would come back. I don't think they would. I don't think they will. This train has left the station. So this is again something that many of the panelists mentioned before, is that nowadays the field of politics is a lot more fragmented than it used to be in 1950s, where you could actually still talk to people on a basis of few common denominators. It used to be in 19th century, class used to be one of those things. You could talk to people based on class. And this is why you will also still have in UK, one of the two main parties is a Labour Party. But it's difficult to, in 2016, still maintain and make this broad appeal to the electorate based on one single sort of political denominator. Because nowadays, none of us, I don't think, well, maybe there's someone in the audience who would raise their hand and say that their political identity can be reduced to this one single aspect. It has really fragmented. So, and lots of things that were deemed outside of politics, like the most obvious ones are probably like gender, which was not the issue of politics in early 20th century, but since late 60s, 70s, it has become highly political dimension. So this is not possible to get back. And the first point that I'd like to make is that I think that the political parties of the 20th century are being squeezed. They are losing ground on the traditional ground from which they used to appeal to the electorate. Now, the second thing is that if this ground that used to be there is dwindling, if it's decreasing, if it's fading away, then a lot of political parties and politicians have been turning towards new avenues of appealing to broad public. And again, this is something that was mentioned by several people before, is that you can go and shoot for the lowest common denominator, you can go and shoot for a fair, you can go and shoot for opposition. So it's a lot easier to find, even with people in this room, it's a lot easier to find something that we're all opposed to, rather than find something that we all stand for. So this is the second big challenge. And now the third challenge will follow out of those two, that to my mind, the fundamental challenge for political parties is to reinvent or find the way of building solidarity in the world which is fundamentally fragmented. So it's much more fragmented than it used to be, and the politics cannot work on a ways that it used to work in the world that's no longer there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tarmo. Would any of the panelists like to respond? I know Nico does, and I would in particular like you to also respond to the point that Doru raised about NGOs versus political parties, and the issue of the other forms of, I mean, since you said that people should join the political parties, and I agree, in a democracy that is how you participate in politics, you have to take into consideration all the other actors. Yes, NGOs, on the other hand, NGOs and other actors are more popular and growing stronger, and there are more movements. However, they still do not take decisions on how public money is spent. So they have considerably less power, obviously. Nico, please, if you'd like to respond.
Since we are here to discuss, I will not mention the points I agree with. I would just focus on my disagreements. Even if we are under the impression of Donald Trump and the US election, I think European political systems, with largely most of them proportional vote and parliamentary systems, are not really comparable to what was going on over there. Also, the parties are the parties in the US are not parties in the sense of the parties we are talking around this table here. And I believe parliamentary democracy is an achievement of civilization. And to find compromise with each other, to exchange arguments, to trust in the power of the better argument, and to be aware that I'm a party, that I'm only a part of society myself, and I respect the opinions and interests of others in the society. This is an achievement. And to put it frankly, I have the impression that from the NGO side, from the more left side of the NGO wing, this is under challenge with the idea of an utopia where all the good people participate all of the time in civil engagement, and then somehow, I'm oversimplifying this, somehow a new good world will appear. And the other side is now that this is taken over by a discourse from the right, which is a very vulgar understanding of people's democracy, where there is one will of the people, which is not part, but it's the true will of the people that is only expressed by a leader or by a populist movement. And what we see now is that there is a challenge for parliamentary party democracy in this vulgar way. If Donald Trump is not using the institutions anymore, but communicating via video messages. So the idea is to have no parliament, no form of deliberation, but an amorph mass that is under the impression that it is participating somehow, and a leader somewhere on top who is playing on this. And I think the model is true also for people like Farage, Le Pen, and the others. So there I would say parliamentary party democracy is an achievement that took many centuries to evolve, and it is worth defending, and it is the better democracy. There is no better democracy out there. And the second point I want to make is, it's just underlining what I said before. We all now can very easily name the names of the populists in Europe. But why is it that we cannot name the names of the stars of the other political parties? Because it's not the common denominator that wins. I think it was the weakness of conventional politicians, of personalities with attitude and image who can be in this political discussions. And that's where the parties do not fulfill their functions. I mean, people are getting candidacies because it's their turn, not because they are able to be the best candidate. People are getting their candidacies because they have oligarchic networks within the political parties, because the parties have been closed down for so long, because the parties are not open for outsiders to join the ranks and be candidates for the party. I think that's the problem there. Jean Monnet, I will finish now, but Jean Monnet once said, in politics there are two dynamics: the dynamics of fear and the dynamics of hope. And what we see now is not so much that the dynamics of fear of working. This has always been working. I think we see a weakness of politicians with attitude and image, and that wins elections, not party programs and left and right ideology. I would agree with that. But attitude and image of personalities is needed to win elections, and conventional parties have problems of producing that by system. I mean, even Angela Merkel, that's the only name one can name right now on the conventional side of politics, and everybody would agree that she is a name in that. She is an outsider. She is not coming from a classic party career. She was coming from outside. I mean, that shows just how big the structural problem of political parties is to produce those personalities. And again, maybe it would help if the parties would be open and make offers, and if the NGO people and others who are willing to support democracy would go into the party business and help with parliamentary democracy.
So you're saying that Angela Merkel is an exception rather than a rule?
It's a big problem for the CDU that we do not produce those people by system, but by accident. I mean, if you are a party organization and you want to be successful, you better think about how to bring the people who can win into offices and not the people who, I don't know, put posters up for 20 years and have no talent of speaking or developing an image that is attractive to the people. It's clear.
But can I ask you, there is this contradiction, or I almost feel the pain of traditional political parties trying to look in the mirror and see what it is that they need to do today to succeed. And they look in the mirror and they don't like what they see, because obviously to succeed, one very obvious way is to be vulgar, to go low, and to become a populist, because that works. What are some other, do you have some other constructive ideas of what could work?
Well, I think we could discuss what means populism, and I believe that basically traditional parties have been better in passing the messages. So populism is only, I believe, when you say I am the only one that can do something and everybody else is crap. So that I would go to such a type of definition of populism. So I think that's definitely something that political parties mainstream in Europe, they should address, and they try to come to it. But the other issue, I believe that what should be discussed, what is a constitutional role of political parties. And I would say the countries that I know best should go, I believe, trying to really very clearly to make the financing of the parties completely open. And that would basically mean no donation. I would even say it's good to discuss what could be the membership fees, just the political financing coming from the state. We could discuss the rules, but it's different countries, definitely. But here, I think that's the main issue, because insider or outsider, that I think is good divide when you establish party, but the sooner or later you are successful, you also become insider. So as a result, this process is not bringing value in itself, and I would believe that would be good that at some stage society would think that insider is not so bad as well. So that, I believe, is a goal that should be dealt with. That's my point is, populism is something that we should learn of, how to use it better for mainstream messages. But the second issue is definitely what is the role of political parties in particular society. I'm not saying that that should be in each country regulation should be the same, but for my country, I said what I think would be the best.
Vita?
I was very pleased to hear somebody who is a party member recognize that there is a problem within established parties of what I touched upon earlier, having a loyalty to the party system rather than perhaps to the best candidate or the most attractive candidate, that they've got to loosen up a bit in order to be successful. And here, I think one has to recognize in what the populists are doing all over the world today, that grain of truth that they have taken and run with. And if the parties of the traditional parties do not recognize today that grain of truth, one of them being the system, for loyalty to the system rather than to principles, ideals, and ideologies. That's one truth that the populists have taken and run with. You seem to have recognized it. The other truth being, and you have touched upon it as well, is years and years and decades of this obnoxious language, which I've always found capacity building and all that. You've heard enough of it, Mr. Piebalgs, I'm sure, during your years in Brussels. If politicians do not realize that most of their voters don't understand what they're talking about, that basically this is a language that is used only among the elite itself, unless they realize that, it's also going to be, so there's another grain of truth in the populist message. So I think this is something that the parties need to do today. The classical traditional parties is realize what the populists, what is that little pulse that they have put their finger on. And I would like to go back to something you said as well about the fact that the parliamentary system is an achievement of civilization. I fully agree. But I think today there is a problem, and that is that what we call civilization, the way we have understood it for years as being an educated class, and here you can speak of class, this, I'm not overly convinced that this model is so appropriate, because I think one of the problems of our democracy today is that, as the famous phrase goes, in order to have a democracy, you've got to have Democrats. And in order to have Democrats, you need an educated public. And I think we cannot talk about political parties today, and it's related to this whole issue of vulgarity and so forth, without addressing the issue of the dumbing down of the electorate. And I truly hope that what we have seen in America, as you suggested, will not be applicable to Europe. I truly hope so, but I think this is another message for parties. You have got to be ahead of the curve. You have got to expect the worst. Living in your bubble and saying that everything is going to be fine, our electorate is just much smarter and is never going to go that path. I'm not so convinced that one can calmly live within that bubble and not see some rather dire consequences.
Thank you. It's interesting how traditional parties should learn from populists, or putting it in simpler words, just learn to talk in ways that the public can understand. I would like at this point to ask the audience if you have maybe some input in what are, in your opinion, the biggest problems that the political parties face in Latvia, or if you come from another country, from your country, and ask the panelists. We'll take a couple of questions. and you will need to use the microphone.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm chairman of the Peasants' Union, and I'm also head of the board, member of the board, Arturs Malta. I would like to say what said Mrs. Matiss. How many parties do we have at the parliament? And what are the differences between the factions that we have in the parliament? Do they have a common motto, common slogan? Do they have common ideology? And then none of them fights and complies with the constitution in full. Excuse me, what is your question? How many parties do we have in the parliament, and how to demand responsibility from our MPs to comply with the constitution? We know they gave the solemn oath. Everybody signed the declaration, but who of those MPs present here really obeys and honors this oath of allegiance to the Constitution? Actually, the question was about the issue of the responsibility towards it.
Gave his definition of populism. Could you please give us a short take on how would you define what populism is?
Paldies, thank you. Vai vēl kādi jautājumi šajā brīdī?
Any other questions, please, at this point?
I would like to address a question to Vita Matiss about the, you mentioned the fact that our society, our electorate is a little bit dull to an extent that we buy populism, that we vote for the parties that are populist, that promise us things that they cannot really be successful in achieving. My question to you is, how do you think, is it possible that our society can be manipulated in ways and our electorate has become duller if our society is more educated than ever, more informed than ever, and among young people in general, our young generations are more educated than any generation before? So how is it possible that, bearing in mind all these previously mentioned things, that still society can be manipulated in ways that we vote for political parties that cannot really achieve what they're promising? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start with the last question. Vita.
Thank you for that question. You said that people today are more informed than ever before. I would like to distinguish between information and knowledge. Yes, there is a barrage of knowledge. There is a barrage of, a barrage of information out there. You can't keep up with all of your Twitter feeds, your Snapchats, your Instagrams, your Facebooks, and so forth, and all the different news, cable news channels and so forth. The information overload is very difficult to manage. And yes, I fully agree. This generation, today's people are more informed than ever before. But are they necessarily more knowledgeable? Are they necessarily wiser for all of that? I'm not convinced that there is a direct line from more information to greater knowledge to more wisdom. And I think this is part of the problem, and part of the problem also being that all the information out there, we used to have journalists, also politicians, we used to have people who, in a way, served as gatekeepers and filtered what was false, what was true, and what you received was, in a way, qualitative. Of course, not always, but qualitative. So I think the quality of the information is an issue here. And another issue is, 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, yes, it will be 50 years ago that Martin Luther King was assassinated. There is a famous clip, I think you can get it on YouTube, where he has just found out about the assassination of Martin Luther King, and he's campaigning, or whatever, must have been 68, and he's on the back of a truck, it's like dark outside, and he's addressing a group of black people, and it's off the cuff what he's saying, and it's a wonderful speech. And you know what he does? He quotes the Greek classics. He quotes Aeschylus and so forth. If you play the clips of politicians speaking, even in America 50 years ago, and then you play clips of them speaking today, I don't see how you can come to another conclusion other than that, the way we speak in political life today and in life in general has not necessarily gone the path of civilization. And I think this is one of the problems of democracy. So to answer your question, information overload, more information does not always necessarily lead to greater wisdom.
Nico, you wanted to add?
I have a suggestion. Let's not talk in a patronizing way of the people. I would try to avoid this, because it always creates the impression I am smart, but somehow there are some dumb people out there who believe in populism and in propaganda. But I do not. And everybody has the same impression. People are smarter, voters are smarter than one thinks. For example, in the US, sometimes I have the impression there is a large amount of voters who can look through the debris of the very ugly campaign and ask themselves, what benefits me in the end? And I will cast my vote that way. And it's a very difficult approach. It's maybe for observers easier than for party politicians, but for party politicians I would always suggest take people seriously. It does not necessarily contradict what has been said, but I think it's important to mention. The second thing I want to mention is let's also not bash the politicians. I know a lot of politicians who work a lot, who stand to their convictions, and who have, in my mind, that's why I'm in political consulting, one of the most unthankful jobs that there is. Because they are bashed on the head all of the times, they have to open up their private life to the media. And as in any social group, there are politicians that work better and some that work worse, but it doesn't help to bash on the political class. It also makes the job so unattractive. If we want to have good people coming into party politics, we should have interest in making it a respectful and attractive matter. What I worry about with the populism is that it is becoming a mobilization technique, first and foremost, of us against them. Us against the politicians, us against the elites, us against Brussels, us against the Washington establishment. And it's a very anti-pluralist notion to suggest that there is a true will of the people and somehow the true will of the people has to be cut off. It's in contradiction to what our societies are, pluralist, very individualistic, very different views of the world and very different interests. If this continues with this approach to the true will of the people in a populist fashion, I feel this will lead not only to conflicts in societies, but it will also lead to conflicts between societies.
Just quickly, yes, Vita, quickly, and then we'll come back to the question to Mr. Piebalgs.
I fully agree with you, and I pointed out that one of the big mistakes parties are making is not listening to that grain of truth that populists are talking about. But on the other hand, I think one also, in this day and age, needs to call a spade a spade. Thank you.
Okay, there was a question to Mr. Piebalgs about your definition of populism.
I did it. I think I will try to answer the very complicated question. What to do if members of parliament, in public opinion, are working against constitution? in my opinion, Latvia is a country that is well-established democracy, so with institutions there. And I believe in such a country, rule of law is confirmed by judgment of the court. So if somebody believes that somebody in the parliament, or the whole parliament, is working against constitution, then make a legal claim. And court will decide you are right or wrong. Because it's true we could have different perceptions, but only court could establish the final truth. And that, I think, is the answer to the question asked, why they are breaking. It's his opinion. So, but for society, what matters is court opinion, and we could move on only basis on the constitution, our legislation, and the court cases.
Sorry, Mr. Piebalgs, can I just follow up? Because are you suggesting that for the voters to keep politicians accountable, the only way of doing so is taking them to court?
No, I'm not saying, well, why not? Why not? If you believe, but accountability is related with next elections. That is accountability. You are elected for a particular time in the parliament. You work according to your views, and voters decide your accountability in the next elections. What I am saying, it's more stronger statement that was made. It was not about accountability. It was basically about impunity. It was by far more stronger. And if it is so, in anybody's members of society opinion, then the only way to address this is a court. Because saying this, it sounds terribly. It sounds that, well, the country has been stolen away by the people that are elected. I would strongly disagree. But if there is a case, and there could be different opinion, the only thing that would matter for me to take a different opinion would be court's decision on particular issue.
Okay, so a court decision being passed on a politician on a case of corruption surely is, or on another matter, surely is one criteria for evaluating a politician or somebody who's running for office.
No,
but I think, especially in Latvia, the rhetoric about, oh, I have not done anything wrong because the court has not decided so, has been used, I think, too much, and I think politicians can surely be evaluated and judged based on a number of other things and ideology other than whether or not they have been judged by the court. And the question is, what are those things and how they make a case to the public?
Being in politics, you're judged anyhow each day. And it's not easy. I just remember the member of parliament from UK being killed for her pro-European views. So it's a high-risk area. So you are judged by media, by neighbors, by everybody. And that affects you. It's not true. But what I was saying, there was much by far stronger statement. It's about stealing of the state. Because if the main elected constitution does not, the main elected body of the state does not follow the constitution, then you can't speak about the state. So it's too strong for me, but if somebody believes in it, then it's only one way, go through the court, because court will give you right or wrong, but to make such a type of statements, I think, is against the essence of this country.
Can we talk about, we've talked a lot about politicians, but can we talk about the voters or the public and their expectations? It was suggested in the survey that we made prior to this event that perhaps the voters' expectations of politicians today are too high, or they are inappropriate, as in they are impossible. They are populist, they are for the politicians to be rock stars, not implement policy. They are, and this is what pushes politicians over the edge to promise voters populist promises, free money, and so forth. What do you think are the voters' expectations of politicians today? How have they changed, and how should the politicians respond? Who would like to begin? Yes, Nico, please go ahead.
I think people have the legitimate interest that they want their problems to be solved. They do not want to have the world explained to them by political parties. They want their problems to be solved. And the role political parties have in a party system and in a political system is to understand the problems, to formulate possible solutions, and then to execute the solutions if they should be voted for. And by the way, it's not, to my mind, it's not true that the people demand celebrities and populism. It's one way of appealing to them, maybe, but for example, in a country, a very interesting country such as Croatia, just recently a person won the elections there, Andrej Plenković, with his party, in an environment where there's a lot of populism, with a non-populist campaign, with a very sober approach to problem solving, without very big promises about what would happen. And people trusted that and gave their votes for that. Also, the expectation management, for example, in our country of Angela Merkel is always playing things low, but then doing what you're saying. And it seems to work. So I would not say that people want a lot of promises and people want this kind of populism. It's one way of appealing to them. The problem-solving issue has become very difficult for political parties because, firstly, problems are so individual that it's very difficult to aggregate them. Everybody wants their own individual problem to be solved. And the second is parties, to be very honest, they cannot solve the problems anymore, and most of the problems cannot be solved anymore on the national level. And I think this is what is, at the moment, the biggest challenge if it comes to formulating political ideas, because we as Germany or as Latvia, we cannot solve the problems that are there on the table right now. And this is making it especially difficult in the current situation. If you look debt crisis in the Eurozone, if you look refugee crisis, if you look Russian attack on Ukraine, how can one political party from one national country offer a possible solution to that? And again, there is probably a communicative approach necessary to break down big problems such as these into understandable bits that are actually solvable and to put on a path towards the solution. And that's where parties seem to have a lot of difficulties at the moment. But I would advertise political parties being, rather than in the 50s where they have been ideological machines, they should be problem-solving agencies. And there comes a lot of understanding of what a political party is with the understanding of being a problem-solving agency.
Thank you. Tarmo, and then we'll take questions from the audience.
Yeah, it's a very sensible way of looking at the politics, and but what I would perhaps like to bring out there is that there is a not necessarily a contradiction, but there's an inherent danger in going down this way, that viewing politics as a kind of a clean, rational solving of people's everyday problems. What we had in Estonia just last week was a change of government where we had the Reform Party, who had been solving problems for 16 years, and quite successfully so, being ousted. And it was not for their lack of problem-solving abilities. They are. I'm not a big supporter of Reform Party myself, but I would have to conclude that they are by far the most experienced problem solvers in Estonia. But in Estonia is perhaps not even the best case in making this point. And the point that I'm trying to make is that I think it's quite dangerous to try and extract the emotion from and I'm not saying that this is what you were doing, but there seems to be a tendency of viewing politics as removed from emotion, viewing it as a clean field of rational decision making. And sorry.
I'm German.
Yeah. But this, it might work up to a point. But in Estonia, the film screening that we had yesterday, and some of the faces I recognize from there in this room as well. So the project, what was it about, was that 5 years ago there was a theater company that staged a party convention. It was a huge event of several thousand people gathering together, and it was sort of a mock setting up a mock party. And I'm kind of giving a spoiler to the movie that they ended up not doing it in the end. But there was no doubt that they could have actually ran for the government, or not the government, ran for the parliament and gotten in. And the way they did it was that they were absolutely clean and adamant about saying that we don't have a platform, we don't need one. So we are just the new force. We are coming to make things anew. And it's a silly message, but I think they were quite convincing in demonstrating that you can run on that message. You can actually get to the parliament, you can get to the power. Based on openly saying that you don't have a platform and you don't even intend to solve people's problems. You only address them. And it's important not to forget that while solving problems.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. It's not very encouraging to realize that you can run for parliament successfully by saying, I have no message.
We have that. We have one member of parliament from Germany in the European Parliament from Die Partei, the party, which is a satire magazine. And their slogan for running for the campaign was yes to Europe, no to Europe. And in every vote, the one member of the European Parliament, in every vote that there is in the European Parliament, he votes in alternation yes and no, regardless of what it is. That's what he does for, I don't know, 3 years now. So it's
Can I have just a brief remark also on top of this? It's coming back to what Nico was saying before. I completely agree that it's a very bad route to take to assume that these people are dumb. They were voting for Donald Trump. They were silly people. Silly people voted for. Silly people voted for Brexit. So it's way too easy a solution. But one of the things that I just read a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was a very profound notion, is to say that it tells something about people's kind of a trust to the democratic institutions, that they can cast their vote for Donald Trump and be sure at the same time that they are being shielded by the bad effects of their decision at the same time. So the Brexit was also the same thing. So it is possible nowadays to actually go and throw away your vote for Donald Trump and be sure that all the crazy stuff that he said is not going to happen, because the democratic institutions will mitigate them.
Thank you. How about some questions from the audience? I saw that Vita was first, and then we'll go on this side. Vita.
Thank you. I'm also thinking back to yesterday's film, especially the message that sometimes it's not the case that if people knew how they're being manipulated, that their votes would change as a result of that. Looking back also the recent history of Latvia, I don't remember any election campaign where no populist political party took part. So one of the questions I would like to ask the audience is whether you see in the past such a thing as a golden age for non-populist political parties. If yes, what was different then from how it is now? And my second question is, I was quite inspired by what Mr. Lange started to do by naming some political parties that, in his mind, are doing something right. For example, solving problems despite there being populist not overestimating what can or cannot be achievable. I would like to ask other panelists whether you have noticed something in any country coming from a political party, non-populist political party, that in your opinion is fit for the contemporary age and could work for other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. It's too good a question to pass up, and I'd like to invite you to respond to the question about, well, perhaps starting with the question of thinking of examples, of other examples of what political parties are doing right, non-populist political parties. That could be inspiring.
Silence.
While you think about it, maybe we should take another question. Doru?
Yeah, well, there are things that the political parties, the traditional one, are doing right. No, they, as I said earlier, involving the citizens in their own decision-making apparatus. That is one thing that works. Whether it is in the form of primaries now, and I gave the example of the French because they have just conducted their primaries there. There are over 4 million citizens, I think, that cast their votes in the primaries of the Republican Party in France. And obviously, that's much more than the core party apparatus of the Republicans. And so getting them involved in your own internal decision-making process is a way to cultivate allegiance to your party and to your views. And then I would also like to, now that I have the opportunity, to the fact that there is the following phenomenon happening as a result of the excess of information, especially on the internet. Everybody thinks that they know everything. That's how it works. There is so much information out there that everybody can search, and then it doesn't matter whether the information is right or wrong, whether it is false or true. What happens is that people, as a result of it, they think they know everything, and they become much more opinionated. Now, everybody has an opinion on everything, all sorts of policies. It doesn't matter whether you are an economist or you have any basic knowledge of the economy. You have an opinion about the economy, which is okay, but which makes it very difficult for the parties to discipline this kind of people, so to invite them into their ranks and to ask them to share their views because they already have a view, and they would not like the party to impose their view on you. So this is one of the problems that the parties are facing now, that it is that people already have strong opinions and they would not like to join the parties and have to change their opinions as a result of that, just to be in line with the view of the leadership of the party. That's why the parties need to learn how to make coalitions with ad hoc groups on ad hoc issues in the society.
Thank you. Vita?
To answer Iveta's question about parties that seem to be doing something right, I think if we look at the countries where populism isn't so popular and the more traditional parties are quite successful, let's say Canada, Germany, or even now with the recent win François Fillon in France, I think there is a common denominator in that in all these countries, the vulnerable, there is a safety net for the most vulnerable, those that have been vulnerable to the market forces, or I'll use a catchword, sorry, I shouldn't, globalization, those that have been buffeted a bit more against the tsunami that worldwide globalization has caused. The social safety nets for the most vulnerable are stronger in these countries. And so you can ask, are the parties successful there because they're just so good? Or is it because they have implemented a policy which protects the vulnerable to a greater extent than in other countries? And if we're speaking about Latvia, I think, Andris, you need to be careful because this net, the vulnerable here are not so well protected as in the countries where parties are doing well.
Nico?
Two examples that come to mind about parties that are doing something right. There is an interesting party in Austria, it's called the Neos, who decided that all of their party meetings and all of their party offices will be held in the public sphere. So they have their offices in shopping centers, in shopping streets, and it's all open and it's visible. I think it's a very interesting approach. And the second one is from our own party reform in the CDU. It's very simple but very effective. We found out what we have to do with party meetings is we have to announce an exact starting time and an exact ending time. No sitting around for all evening drinking beer and then maybe deciding something at 1 in the morning. But starting at 6, ending at 8, it's clear no decision will be held after 8. You know what? More women are coming, more people are coming from the age groups from 25 to 40 that are very difficult to reach for political parties because they have a professional life, they have kids, and they have to be careful with their time. So sometimes simple things can help to make parties more attractive.
Thank you. May I invite a couple of more questions?
My name is Kaspars, and I was just one of the comments is that you mentioned that politicians don't have this perception. The politicians steal the country, right? And I'm pretty sure that everyone here agrees that we have some bad experiences previously. But that's of course a separate discussion and a separate question. And yeah, if you look at some industries. My question was, don't you think that having like the only real way to impact the elections is having to re-elect different people or the same people every 4 years? Isn't that like really old school? Thank you.
Old school bad?
Let's have a couple of more questions and then reply.
My name is Dmitry. I have a question for Vita, probably. I would like to disagree a bit. I wouldn't say that there is more information but less knowledge, because there is more to know. The amount of information that people need and the amount of knowledge that people need has grown exponentially from the last centuries. The amount of change that is going on has grown exponentially, and it's still growing and more exponentially. And the problem are getting more complicated for any person to resolve or to know how to solve at all. And most people specialize, probably all people specialize in some area because there is so much information that human capacity has its limit, and we cannot hope even to be able to decide and to know the right solutions for anything. And based on that, people who are not specializing in particular areas, they look at the information, and information is getting the flow of information is getting faster, and that is what I would agree with, that the quality of information reduces because there are no more gatekeepers that were like editors of newspapers, because everything in the social network right now. And so based on that, there is a growing movement that I found, like ISIS propaganda calls it, extinction of gray zone, that we are getting more extreme in both ways, like on political spectrums there is no more center. And parties and actors on both ends of the spectrum, they actively seek to undermine the solutions that can work, so that they can prove that these solutions do not work. Like in refugee crisis, there is an active undermining of a solution just to prove that that solution doesn't work. In globalization and open markets and many complicated things that where people cannot, most people cannot think that one particular solution is better than other. There is an undermining on both ends of that. What are your thoughts on this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to take some time to respond. Tarmo, would you like to respond to the last?
But anyone can. I have one remark on this.
Okay, so
if I can just put in the remark and say that I was already thinking about this before when we spoke about the information overload. I remembered one famous quote by Mark Twain, which goes that it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure. It simply isn't so. And so the issue with the Internet and Information Society is not so much that there's so much information, rather than, and Doru also touched upon this, and the issue seems to me that it is nowadays possible to find confirmation to whatever you believe. So whatever is your belief, even if you think that the world is run by reptiles, you can find, lots of people who will confirm your belief, which was not necessarily this way before. So it's whatever you like to believe about the world, you can confirm, and that was not necessarily the case before.
I fully agree with that, and I think one, as you called it, specialization. There's so much information out there that everybody specializes. Another word for that is echo chambers. Everybody turns into their specific channel, their cable television channel, which is an echo chamber, as you said, of whatever their specific niche belief may be, and that did not exist before.
Well, about the elections, I think there are two different issues. One where I would say if the mandate is 4 years, then it's 4 years. But it's true that some countries have partial renovation of the parliament more often. And if I see my country, then I definitely see the huge gap between voters and elected. And I believe that ideas that 50% of parliament would be renewed each 2 years would definitely help also parties, because it would keep them more active and more interested in politics, not only once in 4 years. So I would say it's a good proposal to move at least in this direction and try, because I would say I think it will bring more consistent policy and less, I would say, exceptional sprint that's once in 4 years.
The digitalization of information issue, my point to look at it would be, we are in a transition phase, and we will learn what are trusted sources, what are untrusted sources, what is good and bad information. We will learn this. But what we see is that the business models of classic journalism have gone away because of the digitalization of information. And I mean, any business is transformed and new business models emerge and old are going down. But if it happens to journalism, it's what we notice right now, it has a political relevance. And the political task I would see there is we have to find ways of financing quality journalism. Because there is an economic logic beyond populism. Populism sells. That's a task for the political parties to come up with ideas how to have journalism and good information financed, because otherwise we will not be able to have qualified debates between the parties and in the parliaments. That people believe in reptiles, maybe that's just something we have to relearn. Over the last 25 years, at least in Germany, we thought everything goes automatically in our direction. We were not challenged ideologically. And many people of my generation who do not know how it is to be, let's say, thrown out of a pub because you are fighting with believers of another political ideology. My parents are telling me stories about this. But I think we have to relearn this, that there is also an ideological challenge now where people do not agree on this, to see the world and the facts the same way that I do. But it's difficult. I would agree that it's difficult to argue about political solutions with people who believe in reptiles running the world. But it's a political task to find arenas where we can have a qualified exchange between people who believe in different things. And again, I would say that's the parliament where it should happen, not the social media space or any kind of other. We need an institutionalized way of doing this.
Thank you, and thank you especially for the comment on the necessity to finance quality journalism. I hope the present politicians and present journalists will take it to heart. We have time for one last question and then a wrap-up, because we have about 10 minutes left. How about Mike here, who hasn't had the opportunity?
Hello, my name's Mike Collier. It's kind of already been commented on, but liberal democracy requires debate. It requires the concept of compromise, that we're going to seek solutions, but we're not going to get perfect solutions. But it seems to me that for maybe the last 15, 20 years, we've in a very real way been conditioning ourselves in an almost Pavlovian way to adopt a new model, amongst the general public, a new model of perfect democracy, whether it's on Big Brother, whether it's on Pop Idol, or The Apprentice, where we're quite literally voting for Donald Trump. This seems to be an entirely different way of thinking about democracy. It's an immediate democracy, but it's a democracy that's completely black and white. You're in or you're out, you're fired or you get the job. And it seems that, to me, that the traditional parties have kind of lost their way in that they're not able to suggest that compromise is a good thing anymore, and people are really looking for these extremes. There's a great British film towards the end of the 1960s with Peter Cook called The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, which just has some real resonances with what we see at the moment, I think, where he's a spin doctor who becomes a politician, and on the basis of he'll offer perfect democracy to everyone by having referendums on everything. And eventually people get so sick of having these referendums, they just say, well, look, you just decide for us, please. And he becomes a perfect dictator. So really, the question is, how do politicians get that sort of Pop Idol, Big Brother interest in voting and turn it into something positive for compromised democracy?
That's a very good question. How about we take one more, and then in answer to that, we conclude the panel. Elizabeth?
Just remark connected with the question. First of all, I think we discussed about the loss of truth to the parties, to the loss of faith, but it's not only the parties itself, it's as well democratic institutions. And for example, it's very interesting to see around the world then when there are some more populist parties in government or in government, that they even don't take other democratic institutions not for serious and changing it. And there's very, very low demonstration against it, first of all. Secondly, people don't understand or don't want to take it that democracy is slow, because for internet everything is very quick and democracy is always slow. That's one of the second problem I see. The third one is for the populist parties, it's not that only those people who are lost through globalization or who get less income or social problems that they are voting for the populists. There are some other ones as well, and they are really doing it and ruling it. And last not least, what is very interesting with the France premise voters now, they had to pay to choose between those candidates, and they did. So France people did pay €2 to be able to vote for the candidate of the Conservatives. So you can see that people even did invest something to be part of the decision, which I found very interesting. Thanks.
Okay, we have just about 5 minutes left, and may I ask you to respond to Mike's question and also comment on a positive or at least constructive note on what political parties should do tomorrow.
Actually, I think Michael brought out a really interesting and important thing, and there's been very interesting research done in the ways how the members of the Congress have been voting in the United States over the last half of a century. So it's a long study over 50 years, and the picture is very, very clear and univocal. So there's a marked polarization between Democrats and Democratic and Republican candidates' voting patterns in the Congress. So 50 years ago, ago, there used to be a lot more across the aisle voting. So there were Democrats occasionally supporting Republican bills, and then Republicans occasionally supporting Democratic bills. This is all but disappeared now. So it's and I think this is connected with one of the more fundamental things that relates to the way how the party politics or the parliamentary democracy intrinsically works. And we had this discussion with Krista yesterday that in some way what I'd like to say is that the political party system is inherently exclusive. So you cannot belong into two parties at the same time, at least in Estonia you can't. I mean, it's legally impossible, so you cannot. If you are a member of one party, you cannot be a member of another. And
somebody actually checks that.
Sorry?
Somebody actually checks that?
No, I mean, if you register, you cannot register as a member of another party. Yes, it's checked. So when you apply for the membership, then you are checked upon. And I'm not saying that this is... Sorry.
Sorry, but there's no way of doing this. We do not have the data of the members of the Social Democratic Party.
Well, in Estonia, it's actually a law.
Let's not get hung up on that.
But let's not get hung up on that. But I think that there's a fundamental idea that if you are a CDU member, then you cannot be at the same time member of another party. So they are kind of exclusive clubs. And so why I'm bringing this up is that if this thinking forms the basis of the political organization, then it's not that surprising that people kind of drift into their own separate corners.
Doru.
Yeah, well, I'd like to approach the discussion a bit from a different angle and to underline the fact that most of the population, most of the people don't have the time or the interest to participate in conferences like this. So they have a completely different mindset, which is why we're also surprised with some of the results in the elections. No wonder then that by the time they are in their early 20s, let's say, they can come up with ideas such as the fact that, I don't know, reptiles are ruling the world, or that there are simple solutions to very complex questions with regard to the economy and with regard to all of the policy making. And if they get this simplistic view of the world by the time they're in their early 20s, it is very likely that, again, because they have a very busy life, they don't have the time to think about politics, that they will keep these views throughout their entire life. And it is very difficult to reshape their views, and as we were discussing, they will always look for validation of these views throughout their life. And everything, any sort of information that goes against it, they will reject it. Therefore, one of the solutions is to go and to act before this happens. And I'm thinking of the civic and financial educations early in the life of the citizens, so early in school. And this is something that I don't know whether the parties are the best position to do that or the established institution, but I think it would certainly be a resultful way of educating the citizens and preventing problems that would occur later in time. It's an investment, it's a long-term investment, but I think that by educating the public early in their life on how the politics works, on the compromises that need to be done, on the fact that we are a pluralistic society and nobody holds the whole truth, is essential for having democracy and for having political parties, I don't know, 10 years from now or 20 years from now.
Thank you, Doru. I think it was the first time that education or public education was mentioned today, and this is very important. Thank you. Vita.
I think these two phenomena, one brought up in the question concerning the fact that in what you see is less and less of a tendency towards compromise and a movement towards the extremes, and what you brought up about the specialization and the extremes in the information world are actually connected, and one reinforces the other. What you see in America in the past 20 years is absolutely this phenomenon of no compromise. I cannot imagine if a Republican were to compromise with a Democrat, and then that Republican had to appear on the Sean Hannity program on Fox News or something like that. They would be absolutely torn to shreds. And this is why they avoid it. They are afraid of this public humiliation which can be given by those channels and those journalistic outlets that support their parties. What to do about it? Well, we are not going to answer that in the 30 seconds remaining, but I do want to end on that positive note that Krista asked us to end on. And I would like to say that there was a positive effect to the election of Trump in the United States and to the Brexit results. Of what we've seen, and I've read various articles on this, is in the last month or so, a great rise in subscriptions to journals and magazines and newspapers like The Guardian and so forth. So perhaps this is a backlash effect, but this is a positive effect that people perhaps are realizing how precious this free speech is, how precious democracy is, and how much democracy relies on the freedom of speech. So perhaps this is the one positive aspect one can bring up in relation to what has happened in the last 2 months.
Thank you, Vita. Just to add to the positive strings, what I've heard is that also donations to NGOs in the United States have surged enormously. For example, Planned Parenthood and others. So, Andris.
Well, from my side, I think the basis of the mainstream political parties are values. It's true that with the time, I would say, most of the mainstream parties share the same values, but there's still an important difference. And I believe in political compromises, what you need always to see, does you endanger the values your party is being built upon? And in politics, it's always you need to be able at least to discuss with others and to find the solutions to the problem. But I think there's always red lines where you lose your party's identity. And I believe that is also has positive side, because that would mean that parties will continue to exist, and the only thing that they really need to think is how to win elections. And here you need to pass the message, you need to be attractive, you need to be also well accountable.
Thank you, Andris, and thank you very much for coming to this and being on this panel. You are the only politician here, and the reason is not because we didn't ask other politicians, but because they refused to come. So thank you for being very brave. Nico.
I believe that echo chambers and the illusion of permanent direct participation over the internet is also not the end of history. I think it's a temporary phenomenon. It will create large frustrations with a lot of people because they find out that this kind of immediate participation doesn't work and it doesn't solve their problems. The question with this might even be that in some years from now we remember the time when people were clinging to this useless noise, like it's a transition phase where people were busy with this, because the whole robotization of social network information, the professional production of useless noise, I think it will render it irrelevant. 10 years ago, many newspapers had comments under their articles. Most of the newspapers that I know, they have shut this down because it's just used by robots, by trolls, by crazy people. It's not a forum of exchange anymore. Something similar might happen to many of the social networks that we find relevant right now. Secondly, I believe we should not talk about the populists all of the time. We should talk about ourselves. I think populist parties are a barometer for, you used the phrase that I like very much, for a grain of truth. We have to find out what it is. People do not vote for populist parties because they vote for them. It's protest vote against somebody, they want to communicate something to us. We have to understand what it is and give an answer, and it can only be done with being busy with ourselves and finding out what it is. And my last point is, I believe strongly that the only way for political parties to be successful is to make good policies, to deliver political solutions that actually work. And we should not come down on the track where we think everything is just communication. I know too many people in policy making who think politics is just communication. That's not what it is. It's not about spreading fog and making noise. It's about bringing good solutions that work in the end. And I think it's very necessary now to keep that focus and not to jump on this populist communication boat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for today's discussion, for your thoughts, and for coming to Riga. I suggest that we continue this discussion over a long coffee break that will go on until 12:15 in the next room. The second panel, which begins at 12:15, will also be in this room, and it will also be bilingual. So it will be translated into English. We will have 5 Latvian politicians on that panel. And it will deal with issues on what can be done to improve the work of political parties, the question of resources and political party financing. So I invite all of you to stay. But now, please let us give a round of applause to our fantastic panelists.